It's the KC Arts Beat Report. I'm Patrick Neas, and we have an old friend with us today on the show who has been making remarkable music in Kansas City for decades now, and they are in their 38th season, and they have a terrific spring concert coming up that he is going to tell us all about. But before that, I would like you to please like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and please follow us on Facebook too. We post great information about the arts in Kansas City every day, as well as the history of the arts. We post the biographies of composers and their birthdays, and we acknowledge special days in history in the arts. So please follow us on Facebook as well. And now it's time to say hello to Bruce Sorrell, who's the music director and conductor and the founder of the venerable Kansas City Chamber Orchestra. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Patrick. You made me laugh when you're talking about being an old friend. I uh, I have to say that I have looked in the mirror recently and thought, oh, I look younger than I feel.
Yes. Well,
Sometimes it's sort of like, woo.
you look great. And I tell you, we do go way back because you were on KXTR a long time ago when I used to be on KXTR. And
I
it's just
I
amazing.
remember those days. I
Yeah.
do.
So the Kansas City Chamber Orchestra, before we get into your spring concert, which by the way is called Spring Glories, and I do want to say off the top of the bat that it's on Thursday, May 1st at Country Club Christian Church. And for tickets and information, go to kcchamberorchestra.org. But before we talk about the program, I wanted to talk to you, Bruce, about the Kansas City Chamber Orchestra in general. What why did you found this group? What need did you think you were filling?
It's very interesting. I had done my graduate work at SMU with great conductor Anshel Brusilov, who's a fabulous violinist as well. He was concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra in part of the Ormandy years. So that was really terrific. And then I went to London and was studying with the conductor there. And then I was looking kind of like, well, what's the next step going to be? And as I was talking to him, he consistently honed in on the fact that I had mentioned about the fact that there wasn't a chamber orchestra in Kansas City, and maybe that would be something I should do. And lo and behold, that's sort of what came to be. And in some ways, it's remarkable that we're going into season 38 because it felt a little bit like Mickey and Judy putting up a curtain and putting on the show.
Yes.
And it was at that point, Ben Sayevich was hired at the University of Kansas as their violin professor. And then he, in some ways, became sort of the co-founder of the orchestra, being our concertmaster for about 11 of the first years, I believe it was. So that's kind of how it came to be. And I hadn't anticipated returning to the Midwest at that point in my life, and it certainly it's been a great several decades now.
Well, and you play music that the Kansas City Symphony won't do just because, it's a big orchestra. They want to do the big pieces. But
Sure.
there's so much repertoire, wonderful, wonderful repertoire for chamber orchestras that we are lucky enough to hear performed live.
Yes, I totally agree. And even in those instances where we play music that would be more in the symphonic sort of category. So, for instance, we've done almost all of the Beethoven symphonies at one point or the other. You can hear them in a very different way. That doesn't mean I think it's better or in one version or the other, because I love hearing a large orchestra play a big piece. But I also think that Beethoven, so for instance, the Eroica Symphony can be very powerful with a smaller ensemble. But we've done a lot of music out of the Baroque and classical period, even though we've been doing them on modern instruments. We have been informed by all of the sort of research and performance practices that have come up over the past several years, several decades, actually, kind of that started in the 80s as well, of how to perform that music from that time frame. And that way you can have music across several eras actually on one concert. Then if you think of music for strings, the great sort of serenades of Dvorak and Tchaikovsky and just all kinds of great music out there that you're correct, some of which could be played by a big orchestra. But economically, one of the things that you want to do as a planner for a big orchestra is if you've got a piccolo player on staff, you want to use them, you know?
Right, sure,
So, for instance,
sure.
or a number of percussion players. So you do look to make sure that you're using the people that you have on your roster. And being a group that we come together sort of just to do these concerts, basically we hire in for what we need. Um, the other great thing, I think, is that so many of these players have been playing with the chamber orchestra for a very long time now at this point. So when we get together, we just immediately get started and kind of know what our aesthetic is going to be. And it makes it, I think, a lot of fun. We've always featured local soloists, almost entirely either drawn from the orchestra or drawn from the community, and the collaborations that we've done across the city. So that's kind of a little bit about how it all came about and kind of the goals for that. Yes.
And you also accompany uh, people locally from time to time. I know you've played with uh, choirs and with soloists at the Park University International Center for Music. And so you provide a wonderful service that way as well. You always do great concerts, wonderful Christmas concerts. But I don't know, there's something about springtime that seems to bring out the best in chamber orchestra repertoire. And this concert is a perfect example of that.
Well, and it's funny because the sort of the highlight work is Copeland's Appalachian Spring, which it has the season has been associated with it because of that title, but actually the poem didn't really have anything to do with spring as a season. Um, but as we see the ballet that Martha Graham fashioned and listen to the music, it makes perfect sense to kind of like to do it to do it in that season. But he just picked up I think he picked up the title from, or she did. I can't remember which one of them did, but some poem. And they just saw the line Appalachian Spring, and it's like, oh, well, that's what it's going to be because it was set in like the Pennsylvania Dutch territory, I believe. Um, I think one of the interesting things about that piece, well, I think there are several interesting things. One of which is it's quite obvious to me that there was only room for 13 instruments, including probably an upright piano, in the pit for this performance of the ballet that he was writing for Martha Graham. And so that's all there are scored for in the initial
Huh.
version, the original instrumentation. And so it's brilliantly economical and evocative, and the sounds, the instrumentation, it's just delightful. There's no reason it's no question why it is a masterpiece. And then, of course, when he orchestrated it for full orchestra, it's equally delightful. So, but in this one, we're going to hear the original 13 instrument version. And so
For some reason, I think that 13 instrument version more captures that Pennsylvania Dutch spirit.
I suppose that is very true. Um, And the other thing that happened with Copeland that's also interesting, I think, is that here is this sort of Brooklyn-born gay Jewish kid who then, throughout his entire life, I think he lived to age 90, sort of became the embodiment of the Western U.S. sound. I mean, in classical music, when you want to think of something to represent that, it's no wonder the Beef Council chose his
Yeah,
music. What's for dinner,
right, sure.
Rodeo.
And Billy the
So
Kid. Yeah.
I love that about in many ways it speaks to sort of like the polyglot nature of our country as well, of the U.S., of the talent that is here and the way it combines a whole lot of different influences and or background to create something. So yeah, it's a very fun piece, and it's I believe this will be the fifth time we've done it over those 40 years almost. Um, but it's been since 2014 was the last time we performed. So it's been quite a while. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Well, that'll be nice to hear again. And another work on the program that is also done by full orchestras often is the Vaughan Williams piece, which,
Yeah,
yeah, tell us about that.
sorry. So, well, the Larkus ending, I'm just reaching over here to the score. He actually scored it. Okay, this work is also scored for chamber orchestra, right in the score itself. And when performed in this way, players should be directed to play. So it's basically the same set of parts, but they're covering different ways to do that. So he envisioned it to be either large orchestra or much smaller orchestra. So we're doing it with that sort of more one on a part kind of approach. Um, what I love about this piece too is I think if we think of what does English or British sort of music sound like? I mean, we often think of that sort of Renaissance kind of period, particularly when it was part of the big glories of that sort of madrigals and those kinds of things from that period. And then when we get into the 20th century, I think it's Vaughan Williams that sort of tends to capture that sort of modal, interesting melodic textures and scales. And so this piece, the Lark Ascending, really, I think, captures that. So we have two pieces on the program that capture sort of like the spirit of the countries where they're coming from, is in the way of the sounds. Vaughan Williams scored for solo violin this the lark that's just sort of ascending. I mean, it's like it's soaring around, sort of, kind of like it's this very um, most of the work feels very sort of calming and peaceful, and it's very evocative of that sort of English countryside in some ways by capturing this bird soaring up high. Uh, and I've only ever performed this piece one other time, and it's been a
Oh,
number of years. The Chamber Orchestra did it one time recently, right before the pandemic started, I believe, and Carolyn Watson was the guest conductor. Um, but Rena Ishii is going to be the soloist, and I'm really looking forward to sort of featuring her in this piece. It'll be a
now,
lot of fun.
is she a member of the symphony?
She is.
Right,
Yes,
yeah.
she and her husband Duke Lee. Duke is the as a violist.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, the Lark Ascending seems like perfect repertoire for the Kansas City Chamber Orchestra. I'm surprised this will only be the second time you've done it,
I
Frank.
know it. I know. It just is. It is. And it's interesting too because it has a triangle part. And, like you don't often think of something like that having, especially if you're thinking of a string sort of, and some winds and this whole sort of thing. And then there's a triangle part. And, as a conductor and somebody who's watching the budgets, and it's like, well, can I possibly play? I look at the score and it's like, it's not a difficult triangle part, but I'm not going to do it. I said, hire a professional, please.
You had to search out a professional triangle player.
Yeah, any great percussionist, and there are lots of them in Kansas City, can do
Wow.
that.
Well, is that the only thing that person will have to do on this concert?
That's the only thing.
Wow, all right. Well, see, now that's the kind of attention to detail that makes
Yeah.
the chamber orchestra so great. That they
Yeah.
bring in one musician for a whole concert to play the triangle on just one of the pieces. That's awesome. Uh, Wonderful, Bruce. Now you were mentioning, about pieces on the program that capture a national spirit.
Hmm.
The Appalachians Spring. I don't know if you're referring to that. I mean, I think it captures Americana, and of course, Vaughan Williams. But this other piece seems like it does as well, the Nordic Suite.
Yes. Uh, in my work in Tulsa as executive director of chamber music, Tulsa, we've had the Danish String Quartet in at least three times since I've been here. And they're an incredible group. They hadn't quite hit the limelight yet when we first heard them in New York City, and almost immediately said we need to hire these guys in, and then they just have exploded in popularity. It's very difficult to get them on a tour because they book up so fast. But one of the things they have done, in addition to playing what I would call the canonical repertoire, extraordinarily well. It's always really interesting the way they play Beethoven or Shostakovich or whatever they're playing. Um, they have done a whole set of folk music recordings that they have arranged to play for string quartet. And the these particular ones have been arranged for string orchestra by them, and they're available. You can hear them played in quartet versions by them on their different recordings of folk music. So if you have any interest at all in hearing really evocative, wonderful Scandinavian sort of folk music arranged for string quartet, they have done a fantastic job. And I know anytime that they play it on a concert, audiences just eat it up. They really, really do love it. So this is five of the different works from their recordings that they've arranged for string orchestra. And we actually played it a year ago on our May concert. And I was like, I often will never sort of repeat something that fast. And I just thought, people don't necessarily know these pieces. People loved them in the concert we did a year ago. Let's hear them again because it's just that kind of music, just really quite delightful. So,
Well, I have many recordings by the Danish String Quartet, and I do notice on many of them they have a strong Scandinavian folk influence. I'm trying to think of hardanger. Is that the kind of violin uh, folk Scandinavian instrument that they seem to try to evoke? They may even have actually used that particular violin in some of their recordings, but it has a
yeah,
really distinctive sound.
I think that is correct. I don't know very much about that at all. All
Uh-huh.
I can say is that on one of the concert tours when they were here in Tulsa, they had an instrument that was a typical instrument. And so I have a feeling that probably was it. But
Uh-huh.
particularly one of them, maybe all of them, grew up playing some folk music. So it's very, if you think of fiddlers,
Yeah.
fiddlers in this country or whatever, Southern kind of style fiddlers or whatever, that it's very much in that genre, that came to this country, I'm sure, through uh, the fiddle traditions of Northern Europe as well, and that's why we have fiddling happening here. I mean, from either the Irish or Scottish kinds of areas to the Northern Europe. So anyway, they've made quite a career of also arranging those works for that and like I said, I don't know very much about those instruments, but I believe you are correct
Right.
based on the fact that he pulled an instrument out and demonstrated it and used it while
I
they
see.
were Runa, I think. So,
It seems like Scandinavian music works really well with chamber orchestras. I'm thinking of the Dagvarain Serenade or the Holberg Suite.
oh yeah.
So if people like that, something tells me they'll like the Nordic Suite.
Yeah. It's got that folk music feel.
Uh-huh.
And so it has that sort of dance kind of effect to it. They've just done a really great job of creating color. And Yeah, like I said, the audience just loved it last year, and I thought let's do it again because it's not music that people know. And so here we go. It'll bring the first half of the program to a close, yes.
And to start off the program is a piece I have to admit I'm not familiar with. I'm kind of ashamed to say it because it's by one of my favorite composers, Samuel Barber.
Well, this is kind of how I feel about it too. It's like, Barber is sort of a contemporary of Aaron Copland, and of course wrote one of the most iconic pieces of music ever in the Adagio, which came out of his string quartet. The Serenade was also written for string quartet, and it's actually his opus one. He was a older teenager when he wrote it. Um, and I mean, I don't think it's considered one of his great works, but it's also really an interesting work. And it's behooves us to hear more of his pieces outside of just the Adagio. Um, and I agree with you that he's a great composer and one we should hear more of. And this is kind of a way to be able to do that. It's like, let's explore and see a little more about him. So I'm really looking forward to doing this. We have not done this is the this is the only piece in the concert that we have not played before. It's about a 10 or 11 minute work. And I'm looking forward to getting into it and sharing it with the audience.
Yeah, now Barber, it's fair to say, was a neo-romantic. Isn't that
Mm,
sort of how he's characterized? So
yes.
is this piece in that mode?
I would say so, or because like the last movement is a dance, and it kind of leaps off the page to me as it's da da dee 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 da 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 dee da 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 da, that kind of thing. It has that sort of more classical era kind of dance sort of feel to it. The opening is a kind of a lush, slow, atmospheric kind of thing that's more in the line and the realm of the adagio. It just opens for a bit. So yeah, he definitely falls in that neo-romantic, neo-classical. He was inspired by composers of the prior eras, and didn't leap into the kinds of work that we were hearing from some of the other composers in that early era. And in some ways, Copland is a little like that as well, only his harmonic vocabulary is so, as he developed it, so distinct that you hear music and you could almost immediately identify it as Copeland. So yeah.
Well, this is quite a program you put together, and it captures the quintessence of springtime. You know, the Samuel Barber Serenade for Strings, Vaughan Williams, The Lark Ascending, the Nordic Suite provided by or arranged by the Danish String Quartet, and Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland. You know, what I like about this program, Bruce, is that you have really solid, popular, fail-safe works like Lark Ascending and Appalachian Spring. Plus, for people who didn't hear the Nordic String Quartet, the Nordic Suite last year, that'll be a discovery, and I'm sure the Barber's going to be a discovery for most people as well. And that's sort of what you go for, isn't it? To bring the familiar along with discoveries.
Yeah, no, I think so. And we've done a lot of new music over the decades because there's a lot of interesting music written for chamber orchestra in our time. And I've always loved to have a program that as much as we can has got some variety, but some cohesion as well. And so thank you for sort of recognizing that part of it, because I do think the trick to doing the program too is like you don't really necessarily want like any meal, you don't want all meat or you don't want all just, appetizers. I mean, maybe somebody sit down and eat a whole plate full of oysters and be satisfied, but I mean, it's nice to have a little variety, right?
Sure, sure. Yes. Well, variety is the name of the game with the Kansas City Chamber Orchestra. And this concert again is going to be at Country Club Christian Church. It seems like a perfect venue, especially for the Von Williams, because that church looks so Englishy to me.
Yes, it's true. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yes.
Uh, it's been a long time since we've last performed in country clubs, so I'm looking forward to going back there. And giving I remember one very funny not va yeah, it was a Valentine's Day concert we'd done way back, and a horrible snowstorm came in, and I just like, oh, this is going to be a disaster and nobody's going to come and all of that. And like, okay, it's Valentine's Day. I think there were 200 people there. It's
Wow.
like, what are any of us doing out in this awful weather?
Well, I tell you, when that church is surrounded by a blanket of snow, it looks like a Christmas card.
That's exactly
So
right.
I could see why people would want to go there. And by the way, I didn't mention how propitious it is that you're doing this concert on none other than May Day.
Day. I have to tell you, it's great. It's like, bring your flowers.
Yes. Will you have a maypole set up?
No. But that would be very English, wouldn't it?
It
Yes.
would, it would. So this concert is at 7:30 p.m. May 1st at Country Club Christian Church. It's a don't miss celebration of springtime called Spring Glories. And if you want to get into the spirit of the season, definitely check it out. The Kansas City Chamber Orchestra. For tickets and more information, go to kcchamberorchestra.org. Bruce, it's been a real pleasure talking to you about this awesome concert. And I know it's going to be as delightful as a spring breeze.
Thank you, Patrick. It's been great to talk to.
Yeah. Well, and anyway, I look forward to the next time, Bruce.
Very good. Thank you.
Again, please like and subscribe to KC Arts Beat on YouTube and follow us on Facebook. This has been the KC Arts Beat Report, and until next time, I'm Patrick Neas.